I miss him. He was a character. Okay, today, you know what I want to do today is talk about the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I want to encourage you to not change it. Because I find in myself this temptation to change the message, and we'll get into that in a minute. But as a backdrop, this is a verse we're just going to refer to and not really study, but it's a very well-known verse. Scott's talked on it lately. It's out of Isaiah 55. In Isaiah 55, verse 9, the Lord says, he said, my ways, he goes, as high as the heavens, the stars, the moon, as high as the heavens are above the earth, that's how high my ways are than yours. And that's how different my thoughts are than yours. And so that thought will be a backdrop here as we look at the gospel of Jesus Christ, because what Jesus came and did is and was foolishness to men. It was foolishness. And we'll get into that a little more. And see, what I constantly find within myself is this temptation to try to make his message more appealing, more actually like Jerry's story, like, whoa, he was cool. And Jesus, of course, was cool, but part of what Jesus came to do, men just like, well, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. Nobody comes to set up a kingdom by dying. So, we're going to look at a couple stories from Mark's gospel, and many of you are aware of this, that Mark's gospel is one of three that really follow the same storyline. And John's gospel, the fourth one, John tells some different stories, and he doesn't really follow the narrative. But those three, they kind of track together. So we're going to look at it from Mark 8 and Mark 9, but also it's in Matthew, and also it's in Luke. So I'll kind of be bouncing all over the place a little bit, and I'm probably going to tell the story of the scripture more than I'm going to read it today, but everything is in Mark 8 and 9, and then I'll reference Matthew and Luke and tell those chapters as well. So what we find as we jump into this story is that we're in the middle of Jesus' ministry. And, you know, as I've been thinking about this, I want to say that I've really been enjoying the Chosen video series. I know many of you have seen that, but I'm sure there's a couple of you that haven't. It's free. You can watch it on YouTube, or you can get their app. And because people have donated, it's free to watch. And it tells the story of Jesus, but it does this thing that I'm really thankful for, which is they try to provide some of the story that the Bible doesn't give us. Now, that's always dangerous because, well, what if what they make up isn't right? And, you know, you're right. That's always a possibility. But they jump into things like, what was Peter's life like before Jesus? And what was Matthew like? And they delve in a little deeper, and I have really enjoyed that. You know, for instance, we know Peter was married. Now, if you only read your Bible, the only reason from the Gospels you know Peter is married is because one time it says that Jesus heals his mother-in-law. It says nothing about his wife, but you're like, wait a minute, he's got a mother-in-law? Oh, he must be married. And so in The Chosen, you get to learn some of this story, and they may have the story all wrong, okay? They made that part up. But what it's done is make me think, what was it like for those guys to get to know Jesus? They had a life before that. And, you know, and one of the things that they bring out is that there had been a lot of preachers who come out of the woods and say, hey, I'm the Messiah. And they all had turned out to be fake in one way or another. Or, you know, or they were not the Messiah. So, our guys are getting to know Jesus, and in Mark chapter 8, a real turn in the story, a significant event happens. And so, it begins in Mark 8 and verse 27. And it says that they're walking along. They're in a certain part of the country. They're going along, and suddenly Jesus says to everybody, he says, hey, guys, who do people say that I am? And they say, well, some say that maybe you're the prophet Elijah coming in, maybe one of the other prophets, or this or that person. And so then he says to them, he says, well, who do you guys say that I am? And we know that it's Peter who says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. And in Matthew, in Matthew 16, he brings out, you're the Son of God. And I want to stay with Matthew 16 for a second. This part of it's right there, because then Jesus turns to him and says, Peter, you have got it. That is powerful. And he praises him. He says, Peter, you didn't just say this on your own. You're being led by the Spirit of God. You're right. And then he talks about how important it is that you understand that he's the Messiah. And he goes into talking about something. He says, because listen, Peter, I'm here to start a movement. I'm here to birth something. It's an organism. I'm birthing this thing that is going to transform the earth. Now, you and I know it as a word that's laden with context. He said, I'm going to build the church. And as soon as you and I hear church, sometimes we think, oh yeah, building or preachers. And those things, no. Jesus says, I'm building a movement. This organism, he goes, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be people coming together to worship me, and my Spirit, the Spirit of God, will be in the midst of them. And it's a new movement that will transform the earth. And so Peter and the guys are excited. And, we know that all those guys have, for generations, they and their parents have been hearing about the Messiah is going to come. And so here they are with the Messiah, and he's talking about this thing he's going to birth, and it's like awesome. And he praises Peter, and so it's just this awesome event. And then suddenly Jesus says, and by the way, here's the first thing Jesus does that freaks him out. He says, don't tell anybody. It's like, what? He goes, don't tell anybody. And then he really puts it on his head. He goes, because I'm on my way to Jerusalem, and there I'm going to be persecuted. I'm going to suffer, and actually they're going to kill me. But 3 days later I will rise again. And he might as well have been speaking another language. They had no context whatsoever. Context, I said with the church, it's a bad thing. We think of buildings. But, when Jesus gives this part of his story, they have no context. They're like, what are you talking about? And so Peter, God love him, he begins to rebuke Jesus. And, the word for rebuke there is the same word when Jesus would rebuke a demon and tell it to get out. It's that word. Peter rebuked Jesus and said, what were you drinking? That's not how it's going to be. And then Jesus turns and rebukes Peter and says, okay, you were listening to the Spirit. Now you're listening to the devil. Satan, get behind me. And the head turning of this little thing that happened, you're like, what? So he rebukes Peter. And he says, you're not looking for God's plan anymore. Now you're thinking like a man. And Kevin finds that regularly I want to be like Peter and try to fit it into something that looks good to men. Not necessarily what looks good to God. Jesus actually says the things that are pleasing to men are distasteful. They're abhorrent to God. I mean, that's strong. Like what? Well, like that we prize riches, that we prize good looks, that we would value a person over, wow, they're a good-looking person, as opposed to, oh, man, sorry, what happened to that guy? You know, we do that. And we look at the guy who's disfigured, let's say, and we judge his character as less than the beautiful person. And God says, I hate that. And I constantly do things like that. You know what it looks like for me a lot of times, though? It looks like more like control. Like, Jesus, I got this. Jesus, just, let me run with it here. I got this. I'm in control. Or, Jesus, I want to be, give me power. I want to exercise power here. I want to, or, Jesus, let's do this thing, and let's do it with strength. Let's do it with strength. And Jesus is like, really, I'd rather it look really weak. I mean, and really, we just like, well, I don't get that. Jesus tells Paul's asking for a healing, and he goes, because Jesus, this healing is keeping me from being able to do what I think you want me to do. Like, you've called me to do this. Jesus, I want to do it. This thing I need to be healed from is keeping me back. Please heal me so I can do your thing better. And Jesus says, actually, no. I really like it when you're weak, because when you're weak, my strength can come through. And we just don't like that. We don't get it. And, and I'm not here to badmouth you. That's part of the human thing. But let's hear Isaiah today and say, Lord, your ways are higher than mine. I want to think like you. I want to think like you, because God does want you to think like him, but it just never comes naturally. It's like, God, I want to do something really impressive. And God's like, impressive for who, by the way? Impressive for me, or you're thinking about how it will impress your mother? Well, yeah, my mother loved me, God. Yeah, I said this in the first service. It's been a very interesting season for Sheila and I. Her dad passed away a couple weeks ago. My dad passed away about 6-8 months ago. And I find myself in a season of saying, what is my life about? What's it about? My dad collected some different things, and I've got these things in my basement that he collected. He's got certificates of authenticity from this artist about some art things he did that he was like, this is really awesome and valuable. And I went on eBay the other day for them, and you can't sell them today. 40 years ago when Dad started collecting them, it was such a cool thing. Today, nobody wants them. I don't want to end my life handing off to my children all kinds of collectible things that are worth nothing. I don't care if I hand off to them a bunch of money. I want my life to be for God and his glory. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, and that is that I might be pleasing to him. And he doesn't think like me, and it really drives me crazy. So let's go to the next event that will highlight this. Now we're in Mark 9. We were in Mark 8, now we're in Mark 9, and it's also in Matthew 17 and Luke chapter 9. This event is called the Transfiguration. It's a weird word that's only a Bible word, and so let's talk about it. What happens? The first thing is Jesus and his friends, just 3 guys. Jesus tells his 3 closest, Peter, James, and John, says, guys, come with me. Where are we going? Well, we're going to go on a hike. And they hike up a high mountain. And when I read that, I'm like, Jesus, I'm glad all those guys were young. When I hike up a high mountain, by the end of that, I'm really worn out. They get up there, and some things happen. So they get up to this high mountain. It's Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And suddenly, Jesus begins to glow. Now, Mark talks about his clothes. Whatever color his clothes were, Mark says they changed to a white, purer than any laundry person can make them. His clothes actually changed color. But the other Gospels talk about how his face begins to glow. One of them says it glowed like the sun. So what's happening? You're seeing Jesus glorified for a minute, which should tell you something about your future. You're like, what's heaven going to be like? Well, it's going to be bright. It's going to be pure, and it's going to be what we would call glorious. It's not like our human existence. That's what your future is like. And the next thing you learn about your future is that people that have gone on, they're not dead in the ground. They're living with God, because suddenly shows up Moses and Elijah. And I often think, well, how did they know it was Moses and Elijah? How did Peter and James know? And so I'm guessing that Jesus said, Moses, what is up? And, and high five. And they did their special handshake that they've always done. Elijah, I'm guessing it was that. Because somehow the other guys knew, okay, this is Moses and Elijah with Jesus. And so they have these conversations. It's awesome. And then, I'm sorry, I don't want to leave that yet. Because I do want to remind you, this whole story, all the commentators believe, should remind you of a story from the Old Testament. Because there was another time that somebody went up on a mountain and the power of God came down. And that was when Moses went up a mountain in Exodus 19. And God came down and met with him and spoke with him. And he heard God's voice. And that's when he received the 10 Commandments. And when that happened, I just love to read Exodus 19. The mountain, it says the mountain shook. The whole mountain shook. There's fire. It says the mountain was on fire. So it's just this awesome picture. There was loud trumpets, and Moses goes up. And as he goes up, he says, everybody, stay away. Because God said, if you touch the mountain, you'll die. But now, when Jesus goes up on the mountain, he brings Peter, James, and John, and they do not die. And it is to tell you that Jesus is bringing a new kingdom, and that you are invited into the presence of God in a way that in the Old Testament they would say, you cannot exist. You're going to die. Jesus is saying, no, because of my blood, you're going to come into that reality. So they have this awesome thing, and then they come down the mountain. They come down the mountain. You always have to come off the mountain eventually. So they come down the mountain, and there's this crazy thing going on. And it's a story that you know. There's a man who's got a son, and his son is afflicted with a demon. And you and I might say today, when you read the story, people say, oh, it sounds like he's got epilepsy. And I'm fine with calling it that, but Jesus, when he's going to heal him here, heals him by rebuking a demon. And I don't even like that, but it's what the Bible says, so I want to be true to it. But at first, the man is like, I brought him to your disciples and they can't heal him. And the disciples are arguing with some other guy. And Jesus' first response was very loving and kind. And he goes, how long will I be with you guys? That's actually what he says. And he says, this generation, it's unbelieving. And then in the other Gospels, he uses a word that we might say is like, this generation is distorted. It's confused. It's been corrupted. Because you can't even believe to cast out a simple demon. And it's important that all of us just take that in. It's like, yeah, Lord, that's me too. You know, and in Matthew, God goes on, if you had the smallest amount of faith, if you had the smallest, you could say to a mountain, be moved, and it would obey you. And today, church, hear the rebuke. You know, Proverbs says, whoever takes a rebuke is wise. Jesus today wants to rebuke you and says, stop being so unbelieving. Believe I can do great things. Believe that I want to move through you. God wants you to hear that today. So, then Jesus talks with this dad. And as he talks with the dad, the boy begins to be afflicted and is rolling around on the ground. The boy is suffering on the ground right in front of them. And Jesus, oddly enough, seems to ignore it for a little while so he can talk with this father. That always strikes me strange. Of course, Jesus knows he's going to heal him, and that never again, ever will this happen. So if it goes on for another 20 seconds, apparently Jesus isn't concerned about it. I mean, it really does strike me odd. And so he's talking with this dad, and then this dad says a thing that's very famous. We all know it. The dad says, listen, if you can do anything, help me. And Jesus says, if I can, if you can, he says, all things are possible to him who believes. And then the dad thankfully says what we all love him for, I do believe, but I've got this unbelief. Please help me. And Jesus rebukes the demon. The child convulses and screams as the demon comes out. The boy looks dead. Some of the commentators even wonder if he was dead. But Jesus goes over and reaches, picks him up, and he's completely delivered and healed. And all the people are like, oh, you are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. And then Jesus turns to his disciples and says, and this is from Mark, he goes, now listen, let these words sink into your head. The Son of Man is going to be delivered over to the chief priests and the rulers, and he's going to be killed, and then 3 days later he will rise again. And they go from glory to what? Because Jesus is focused on delivering you and me from sin forever. They're like, Jesus, if you would cast out a few more demons like this, your following would be huge. And Jesus cares nothing about it. He's constantly telling them, don't tell people, because I've got one objective. And it is to go to Jerusalem and die for your sins, so that you can be free from sin forever, so that the church of God can be raised up, and that we can gather together like this, and the Son of God, the presence of God, be in our midst, and we can walk free from sin. That's what he is focused on like a laser. And this time it says the disciples, they're like, I don't even want to ask him about this. So I'm coming closer to the end here, but this next thing I really want to get to, because it's actually what started me on this whole sermon. It's Mark 9. So about verse 28, it says, so then they went later into somebody's house. They're in a house, and it's Jesus and the disciples, so it's private. And then the disciples say, Jesus, why did we fail? Why could we not do that? Why could we not cast that demon out? And this is the thing that has really arrested me. Jesus said, this kind can only be driven out by prayer. And you look back at the story in all three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and you look for, well, where did Jesus pray during this story? He never prayed in any of their accounts. So, okay, wait a minute. Maybe you don't mean then that you prayed at the moment. Maybe you mean this kind can only come out if the person has a life of prayer. And and in this church, with our history, which I love, we've focused on how do we be a people of prayer? How do we walk with a life of prayer? But here's what Kevin does in my mind that I'm sorry to tell you about. In my mind, it becomes, if I pray enough, I'll have the power. If I pray enough, Jesus, I got this. If I pray enough, I can be strong. If I pray enough, I've got it. And it's all about, in my mind, I'm sorry to tell you this, in my mind, it's all about Kevin. And suddenly, Kevin has just prayed for, fill in the blank, they've been healed, and Kevin says, yes, let's all give glory to God. But everybody's looking around, and I'm like, wow, that'll be awesome, because they're going to know that I've got something. And God says, that stinks. Man, he says, Kevin, you smell so bad right now. And that's constantly what I do. Because my thoughts and my ways are down here, and his ways and his thoughts are higher than the heavens above mine. And, the good news is, does he want us to think like him? Yes. Will we make any progress in this? Yes. But apparently, this guy is never going to get to that level. So the gospel of Jesus is that Jesus came and died for your sin, that you might be born again and be free from sin. And don't change it. Don't change it to what? Don't change it into something that's got to look good. Don't change it into something that has to be strong. Don't change it into something that you can control and make look beautiful. A friend of mine 30 years ago said to me, maybe wasn't quite that long, 25. He said, I'd really love to be a preacher. I said, well, dude, why don't you do it? Well, I'm not tall, and I'm not really beautiful. I'm really kind of chunky, and I'm not a great charismatic speaker, so it ain't going to happen. And I thought, that is hell speaking. And it's also true in our churches. And you know what? I, as one of the people who sit in the chairs, I actually like it when the person speaking is beautiful and well-spoken. And if they were short and ugly and didn't speak well, I actually would have a little trouble with it. I don't know about you. And when I realized that, I realized, oh, I'm not like you, God. See, why is it good news to the poor? Because the poor here, you don't have to be rich and beautiful. That's why it's good news to the poor. Don't change the message. So do I want to, am I wanting to yell at you? Like I'm yelling at me. And I apologize if it feels like, well, you're yelling at me too. I don't want to yell at you. You know what I want to do? Here's what I want to say to you. Jesus wants you to be incredibly successful at the ministry he's called you to. And especially if you in any way are like, wow, thank goodness, because I'm not tall and beautiful and well-spoken. Jesus wants you to be incredibly successful. Scott talked about the talents last week. He wants you to use your talents and see great things happen from them. And stop thinking it has to look like something we'd like to put on TV because it's awesome. Believe that God wants to use you with what you've got, with what you've been given. He hates it if you ever think, well, but I'm not, fill in the blank. He says if you had faith like the smallest mustard seed, you and I could move mountains. God wants to do amazing things through you. Let's return to Jesus. Let's return to him and his ways. So, the last one, and we'll be quick and then I'll be done. The next thing that happens in Mark 9 is literally unbelievable, except that I'm like those guys. With all the stories we've just talked about, the next thing we hear is that they're walking somewhere, and Jesus says to them, this is like verses 35 to 37 in Luke 9. Jesus says, hey, guys, what you talking about? Silence. No, guys, really, what are you talking about? And if you know the story, you know because they were talking about which one of them was the greatest. After the Transfiguration, after the healing, after Jesus trying to explain this to them, after him saying, listen, I'm going to Jerusalem to die. I want to die for the sins of mankind. And then they're like Kevin. And they're like, you know what? I do this better than you. Well, but I served such and so. They're talking about who's the greatest. So there's hope for all the knuckleheads like me. There's hope. We fit right in. All right, I want to pray over us here. Jesus, we want you. We want your presence. We want to understand you. We want to walk like you. We want to believe that you want us to be wildly successful. Jesus, I'm praying for these people right here today. They're sitting here. I don't know how they're doing. I don't know what they're thinking about. I want them to know that you want them to be wildly successful in what you've called them to do. Jesus, each one of them has been given gifts. They do things differently than the person sitting on their right and left, and you want them to be wildly successful in advancing your kingdom. I pray that they would feel your presence calling them to that. I pray that they would hear your voice speaking affirmation. Affirmation of how much you're in love with them and want to use them. Thank you that you came, Jesus, to die for our sins, that we might forever be set free from sin, and that we will one day be with you in a glorified presence. Thank you. I'm asking you to bless and strengthen this people. Let's all stand. Jesus, we worship you. We worship you. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for loving us. Jesus, would you bless this people today? In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Have a wonderful day. Bless you.